Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Allen, the Director of Media Relations. In a moment, Sheriff Joe Arpaio and the Cold Case Posse lead investigator Mike Zullo will walk you through the latest revelations coming from an ongoing investigation into whether President Obama's birth certificate, shown to the American public on the White House website in April of 2011, is an authentic or forged document. After a brief opening statement from the sheriff, Mr. Zullo will present his findings. They will be supported by a number of brief video presentations. Our hope is to keep this press conference to 60 minutes or less, plus some time for questions and answers at the end. Now, about that question and answer period, we will answer questions about these findings only. We will not talk about other issues currently facing this sheriff or this sheriff's office during this press conference today. We will not answer any more questions about the cost to send one deputy to Hawaii to assist Mr. Zullo in this investigation. We have been very forthcoming about those costs. We've answered your questions on this topic ad nauseum. The sheriff said on March 1st he would try to do everything he could to avoid spending taxpayers' money for this investigation, but an expenditure became necessary. The posse collected donated funds in order to pay the county taxpayer back, but as you know, 2 board members refused to accept that donation. In recent and past TV, radio, and print news stories, many of you have failed to report that important point. In fact, much of the reporting and editorializing on this investigation has been very critical. The media has demeaned this investigation at every turn as silly and wasteful. Your contempt about the subject and the sheriff for pursuing it has been duly noted. We simply ask right now that you put your preconceived notions about this, listen to the facts, and if you can, keep an open mind. Here's Sheriff Arpaio.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As you know, 250 citizens of this valley, this state, came to me asking me as the head of a law enforcement agency to look into President Obama's birth certificate as released by the White House in April of 2011 on the official White House website, as we suspect it is a fraudulent document. My original intent was to clear the President of the United States, but the investigation initiated by our cold case posse found far too many problems on the birth certificate. So in March of this year, I asked the cold case posse to investigate this matter. We reported at that time, actually we asked 6 months prior to that, but in March we reported our initial results of that 6-month investigation. We found that there was probable cause to suspect the long-form birth certificate presented by the White House was fraudulent. You will also recall that we looked into the President's Selected Service form, and we believe that that form is fraudulent. This continuing investigation has uncovered new information that deepens our concern that the birth certificate document is a forgery. In the process, we have uncovered other serious concerns you will hear about today, which should be interest on a national level. The cold case posse has worked hard, long hours, even though they were stonewalled at every turn by officials in Hawaii and U.S. government agencies. And Mike, here's Mike Zullo, the chief investigator, during the course of this investigation.
Thank you. Today I'm going to try to take a lot of information that has come to light, come to fruition after about 7 months of investigation. A lot of the information that you're going to hear today, excluding one wrap-up video from the March 1st conference, really came about after our trip to Hawaii, is when everything started to gel for us. I'm going to try to set the stage for you and explain some things before showing the videos and try to explain some things to you after the videos. But when this is done, I am going to show you evidence that is on this long-form birth certificate that has nothing to do with computer forensics. I'm going to show you information that was coded, placed on the document by hand back in 1960, and I do believe that if the registrar who's indicated on that birth certificate is in fact the person that coded this document, we sought her, we found her, and we confirmed with her the coding process for federal statistics on a birth certificate issued out of the state of Hawaii. We will show you what is conflicting on this document on its face. So before I do all that, let me just go back to March 1st. I'm going to do a quick recap because there's some things that have been getting misunderstood about what we were saying. In addition, we went even further than the March 1st press conference. We had two other individuals not utilized by us prior to March 1st, Garrett Papik, Tim Saletti Jr. Both of them independently, not knowing of each other, performed over 600 tests apiece on the long-form birth certificate doing computerized forensic analysis. They could not get the document to do what the long-form birth certificate does, the PDF file released by the White House, and independent of each other, both came to the same conclusion. So from a document forensic digital perspective, we believe the document has been tampered with, so much so that the only way to get it to do what it does is with blatant human intervention. So let me show you the first video, and then we're going to move to more recent stuff.
It is not our intention today to revisit all of the many anomalies found in the PDF file purported to contain a certified copy of Barack Obama's original long-form birth certificate. However, we would like to make the following clarification regarding our March 1st press conference. The cold case posse is very much aware that layers can be created when a document is optimized. In fact, we pointed out in video number 4 that the control document in our test contained 45 layers after being optimized. A point that seems to have been lost on some who viewed the last press conference is that the layers in the PDF file released by Barack Obama are not consistent with the types of layers produced by scanning and optimizing a document, but are instead consistent with document tampering. So when you see experts on television or the internet stating that Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate doesn't have any problems because they scanned and optimized a document and they got layers too, they are guilty of not digging deeply enough into the layers to see what types of layers were produced and how those layers differed from the layers in Barack Obama's PDF file. For example, the PDF file released by Barack Obama has 8 1-bit layers and 1 8-bit code background layer. This is not consistent with optimizing a document, but is consistent with tampering. Were the layers truly a result of optimization, we would have seen only 1 1-bit layer and multiple 8-bit background layers. Since March 1st, 2 experts not associated with our first press conference were brought in to review the evidence we presented that day. Before issuing an opinion, both independently ran approximately 600 separate tests. One ran tests on a machine with a Windows operating system, while the other used a Mac. These tests were performed using all forms of compression capable of creating layers and with many different software programs. Both experts came to the same conclusion independently of each other. The Anomalies in the PDF file purported to be a scan of Obama's long-form birth certificate cannot be duplicated using the known forms of compression in currently available software.
As far as we're concerned, our analysis of the digital portion of this document is finished. We are fully persuaded that we could prove that this document has been manipulated. The other thing I want to bring to your attention is we reached out to numerous businesses that do nothing but find experts that are court certified in fields of digital forensics, which is an emerging science, computer animation, and we asked them if they could find someone that we would compensate to look at the document. I want to let you know that every one of these businesses that do this kind of work reported back to us that no one wanted to touch it because of the nature of the document. So we were left to go outside again and make sure that we were correct, and we believe we are correct. We do not believe that this document could ever survive judicial scrutiny on this level. In other words, you couldn't bring it into a courtroom and convince a judge that it's authentic. Moving forward now, we had some anomalies on this document other than the digital forensics, which were troublesome to us. And we knew that at one point in time we were going to have to figure out what these little numbers in certain boxes represented. And if you look at the birth certificate, I'll come back, you'll see, looks like pencil markings with a 0, a 1, and a 9. We didn't know what this was. Through a lot of research, the assistance of Dr. Corsi, who, by the way, is a Harvard PhD and trained in statistics, has taught statistics, we started to pursue leads and made the determination that these codings were actually vital statistics codings required by the federal government in 1960. These codings we learned through our investigation and then locating the mysterious UK Lee, which has plagued this thing for 4 years, where people were wondering who this is. We located Verna Lee. Verna Lee is 95 years old, amazingly sharp. We spoke with her, and she confirms to us what I'm going to share with you now. Back in 1960, birth certificates would come in to the central location at the Department of Health in Hawaii. They would come in what was known as regions or batches. Those documents were taken in. Those documents were then looked at by a human being. This is 1960. And they were coded by hand with numerals that meant something to the federal government. The federal government required this because they would take that coded information, which is of a numeric value, and they would use it on magnetic tape for their census records and other statistical records that they needed. This document would have been coded, and then according to Mrs. Lee, the document would have been rechecked by another employee of Department of Health, then signed by the register. In this case, what it looks to be on this document, it should have been VK Lee, it's UK Lee is what it looks like, signed by her. Then the documents were placed in a secured office where they were numbered in sequence using date of occurrence and or time, whatever happened first. From a specific batch or specific location, Kapolani Hospital, the county of Hawaii, that would be one batch. A regional office, an outlying island, would be a separate batch. Every one of these documents was coded the same way. At the end of the month, these documents sitting in this office, secured in this office, were then numerically numbered by batch. And that's important because they were consecutively numbered with a stamper that advanced itself one digit. The difference here is you could get a different sequence number depending on the batch. And we're going to explain the significance to you now as far as that is concerned. But the coding is what's more important to us than anything else. You look at the Obama certificate, it points out On number 9, under race of the father, where it states African, it also points out, I believe that's business or place of employment. I can't say I don't have my glasses on, excuse me. It has a number 9. We didn't know what the number 9s meant, but what we did know is when we looked at the Nordyke documents, which are on the second easel over there, they were coded different. They were coded with the number 1. We still didn't know what it meant. Going to Hawaii proved to be extremely fruitful for us. Dr. Corsi agreed to come with us to Hawaii, paying his own way, for the sole purpose of doing research for us to try to determine what these numbers were and what they meant. Dr. Corsi went to the state archives, and he went to the Supreme Court Library in Hawaii, Honolulu, Hawaii, to do some of the research. We've discovered what the coding of number 9 means, and I'll explain the significance to you after we watch this next video. Some of these videos, they're fast-moving, but they are designed that way because we want people to watch them over and over again, and they will be available for download later.
When the PDF file containing what we're told is a certified copy of Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate was released, many were curious as to the meaning of the strange pencil markings found throughout the document. It's now known that these markings indicate a document has been coded for vital statistics recording purposes. Though states were paid only pennies per document by the federal government for their work, the task was well worth the effort, as federal funding was and still is tied to population. In order to decipher these codes, the cold case posse obtained information from the 1961 Vital Statistics Instructions Manual for Births. Please note that the number 9 was the code used to indicate that an answer to a particular question was not stated. This puts some of the information on the certified copy of Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate in conflict with the written code. Or perhaps stated another way, the document is essentially in conflict with itself in 2 places. We call your attention to boxes 9 and 12B. Both of these boxes have been coded with a number 9, meaning that the information was not provided by the applicant. If the applicant didn't provide the information, why do these boxes have information in them? Based on the coding on Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate, it should have looked like this, but it does not. Box 9 has always been highly scrutinized because most suspected the term African was not used as a race identifier in 1961. They were correct. It was in fact not used by the federal government until 1989. Some might ask if the clerk coding this document simply made a mistake in boxes 9 and 12B. It should be pointed out that it was the policy of the Hawaii Department of Health to have coding reviewed by a second deputy clerk. The odds of mistake are therefore greatly reduced. A review of the coding indicates that all other codes on Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate that are legible correspond perfectly to the codes listed in the 1961 manual. Codes listed in the manual also correspond perfectly to the coding on the Nordyke twins' long-form birth certificates. We are therefore confident that the codes used on Barack Obama's 1961 long-form birth certificate were taken from this manual. So, in addition to the electronic evidence that the document has been tampered with, we now have supporting evidence provided by the Vital Statistics codes found directly on the document.
You can't have a document coded like other documents, double-checked, and have a code that says 9 not stated, and have a piece of information sitting in the box. That just can't happen. Verna Lee confirmed that for us. As a matter of fact, she was adamant that mistakes didn't happen on her watch. Her exact words. Mistakes doesn't happen on my watch. And she wasn't happy when we asked that question if a mistake could be made. This is critical information because that box being non-stated or not stated should be blank, and it's not on this document. This supports the theory that we set out and later proved through digital analysis that this document has been tampered with and information has been placed on it. Now, there are other theories as to how that happened, and I'll touch on those later. But I want to move on and tell you some other information that came out of our investigation in the state of Hawaii. During the time that we were doing this, we are going to show you and share with you our experience in the state of Hawaii. But before that, interviews that we conducted there started to send us in some directions. And again, I had asked Mr. Corsi to spend another couple days in a law library to see if we could find the answers. I am going to show you the video first, and then I'm going to discuss the video with you. I'm going to try to put it in a form that you could understand what it was we found. What we found for us was shocking. And like the sheriff said in his opening statements to you, this should get national attention. And it's not even directly related to the birth certificate. So let me play this video for you now, and I'll expound on that right after it's over.
The 1955 revised laws, which were in effect in 1961 when Obama was born, made birth registration compulsory in Hawaii. The 1955 revised laws also allowed anyone claiming to have witnessed the birth to register that birth. Please note the state of Hawaii accepted testimony to a birth that was unsworn, and they had no investigative unit to document the unsworn testimony. Most unattended births were registered at local offices. Hawaii had 5 local offices in addition to the central office in downtown Honolulu. In 1982, Hawaii legalized what had been its unofficial policy for decades by making laws that codified Hawaii out-of-state and foreign births as Hawaiian births. Observe this letter sent on March 1st, 1982, from then Hawaiian Director of Health to Hawaiian State Representative Herbert Sagala, who is chairman of the House Committee on Health. Dear Representative Sagala, this bill would require the Department of Health to issue birth certificates to children born or adopted anywhere in the world if their parents were legal residents of the territory or state of Hawaii and paid income tax in Hawaii at the time of their birth or adoption. The department supports this measure, but wishes to point out that such a new activity could have a workload/budgetary impact in the delayed registration section of the Vital Records program. While the department presently has no data from which to project the size of such impact, a large number of requests for such birth certificates would require additional staffing and funds for the program. Note that the Director of Health seems unconcerned over the fact that Hawaiian birth certificates would be given to individuals born in other states and other countries, but is solely concerned that his department receive the necessary increase in staff and funding to handle the anticipated number of requests. According to Hawaiian law, the birth certificates issued by the state of Hawaii only prove that Hawaii has a record of the birth information on file, not that the information is true or accurate. A Hawaiian birth certificate is therefore worthless in terms of its evidentiary or probative value. In order to truly vet a presidential candidate from Hawaii, one must have supporting evidence in addition to a birth certificate. For example, hospital records. As you'll learn in our next video, Kapiolani Hospital has been less than cooperative with those wishing to investigate Barack Obama's alleged birth at their facility.
Let me see if I could put this in a way that it's easy to understand, because it's a little confusing. In 1955 through 1982, Hawaii had a law that basically said you could come in and declare a birth that happened in Hawaii. If it was unattended by a physician, unattended by a hospital, you could come in and you could declare that birth as long as you were an adult and you could prove residency. Now that leaves a pretty big loophole. And what they also knew that was happening, they were getting, and we have evidence of, a lot of foreign citizens, especially from Japan, coming in and using that law to get Hawaii-issued birth certificates. It was a problem. 1982, they institute a new law. In 1982, what they decide to do is expand that program. And that program basically says that if you're an adult, you could go in for a minor child, even if you're not the parents, and you could declare the birth of a child that happened anywhere in the world, as long as you can show proof that the parents were legal residents, not citizens, legal residents, and paid income tax in the state of Hawaii. Legal residence is for domicile needs. Legal residence means I pay rent. I have a house. It doesn't mean you're a United States citizen. They actually allow, through their legislative process, they allow people to declare the birth of an individual abroad and, bypassing naturalization and immigration law, create citizens by issuing a birth certificate from the state of Hawaii. We checked with vital statistics offices, Department of Health offices throughout the nation. Now, we didn't get them all. There is no other agency that we are aware of that has a law that says this. As a matter of fact, in Arizona, you couldn't even do this. Hawaii has some problems now, especially with the recent ruling on SB 1070. That law is in conflict with federal laws for immigration and naturalization. We asked Denise O'Rourke, our attorney, to look into that matter. We thought it would only be a couple. She found a lot. There's some major problems with this practice. You could actually make the case that this is a national security issue to an extent, because that law is a little vague. And that law also says that an adult could go in and make a representation, actually for themselves, as long as they proved mommy and daddy were legal residents in Hawaii, paying income tax for at least 12 months preceding the birth. There's no time limit on this. It could happen 6 months after the birth. It could happen 60 years after the birth. I don't know what they're doing there, but to me, this is a problem. I think the sheriff believes it's a problem. And this is something I'm going to ask, and I hope the media will pick up with. Lay the partisan issues aside. This is a problem. You can't have people that are forced to go through immigration processes, naturalization processes in one part of the country, and have other people that could skate in and get a document that the Inspector General in 2000 has said in his own report that there is rampant birth certificate fraud in the nation. When you get a birth certificate like this from the state of Hawaii, and I guarantee you nobody, because I didn't, think of the state of Hawaii as a border state. It is now. It's a border state. You can go in and get a birth certificate. Now, I know in my life I've been asked 3 times for a birth certificate. 2 of those were getting law enforcement jobs. 1 was for a private sector job. If I walk into the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and I want to apply for a job, if I show an Hawaiian birth certificate, the automatic assumption is I'm a citizen of the United States. We have a deputy that works very close with the sheriff. He was a foreign birth, born to a military father, serving overseas, born in Ireland. This deputy has a birth certificate issued from the Secretary of State, the State Department of the federal government, and it says, foreign-born U.S. citizen. There is a procedure to get this. Hawaii, from all indication, circumvents that procedure. We think the birth certificate issue in Hawaii is of a magnitude that you have to bring now into question every birth certificate that you see from the state of Hawaii. State of Hawaii's own law says that our document is only prima facie evidence. Prima facie evidence means at first sight, first blush. I put a depiction of prima facie evidence, a definition. And what it says in the next sentence is, requires further investigation. The state of Hawaii has no mechanism to source the information that they receive, investigate the information that they receive, yet their law uses the word shall issue. Shall is a mandate. There is no discretion. They also call for certain information to be brought forth, making the representation, but they don't tell you what it is. It is subjective. This is something that we believe is in direct conflict with the Supreme Court's most recent ruling, and I would hope, and I know the sheriff hopes, that Congress would at least take a look at this. That came out of the state of Hawaii. That document that we're referring to, Mr. Corsi found buried in a box. Was that the law library, Joe? The state archives, buried in a box for some 35, 40 years. That letter says it all. They knew what was going to happen, yet they allow it to happen. I'm going to share with you now the next video that's going to give you a little idea of what we encountered in Hawaii, and I'll expound on that a little more. I want to make some corrections for this video. This video keeps referring to the posse, the posse, the posse. I was accompanied by Detective Brian Makowitz, a 15-year veteran, a seasoned homicide investigator. And I just want to, let me just take a minute. I only take a minute. I want to share with you, because it really upsets me personally when I hear about the shellacking the sheriff has taken for sending a deputy. Sheriff Arpaio, as you know, has been threatened numerous times over this investigation. As a matter of fact, I believe there's still somebody on the loose that didn't show up for sentencing that's roaming around. The sheriff calls me in his office, and those of you from the media, you've been in that office, and he's got that big desk. Well, he calls me in his office, and he's sitting on the couch, and he asks me to sit down. And he goes, "You know, Mike, I'm a little concerned that you guys are going there on your own." It's like, "Well, Sheriff, what are we going to do?" He says, I want to send a deputy with you. He says, "You're armed here, but you're not armed over there. What if something happens to you?" You know, so be it. He goes, I can't let that happen. He goes, "I'm going to send a deputy with you." We addressed the cost of this venture to have this happen. The sheriff asked me if he was going to send someone, who I wanted to take. And I asked for Brian. I said, "Sheriff, if I'm going to have to take somebody, send a seasoned investigator, a seasoned detective with me, because we're going to be going to places that may not receive us well. I also need his expertise in putting some of the logistics together and how these things start to mesh together." And that's how Detective Makowitz ended up coming with us. And like the sheriff said, through donations, we had that expense covered. I don't know why the Board of Supervisors decided not to take it, but I can tell you this, I won't beg them to take my money. They had an opportunity to take it, and they didn't. And it troubles me that the sheriff is getting attacked and hung with this when we went out of our way to make sure there was no cost to the taxpayer. So that being said, let me share with you our experience of Hawaii, and we'll go from there.
When the cold case posse went to Hawaii to investigate this matter, they found that most doors were closed to them, and that both government and private sector officials alike were prone to overreacting to their presence. For example, two members of the cold case posse attempted to visit Hawaii State Registrar Alvin Onaka. They were met with local police officers who seemed confused as to why they had been called to the scene and eventually left. She pointed out that as a courtesy, the cold case posse members in Hawaii made their first stop at the local police department. They informed local PD that they were in town and would be asking questions of people, so the visit by local police came as quite a surprise to the posse members. Eventually, the posse was told that Mr. Onaka doesn't speak to the public. Visiting law enforcement officials from another state aren't exactly the general public, but the posse was happy to at least be granted a short meeting with Deputy Attorney General Joe Arpaio. In that meeting, posse members were told that once someone with a direct and tangible interest has been given a copy of a record that had been held by the Hawaii Department of Health, they can do whatever they want with it. Nagamini was given several opportunities to confirm that the PDF file posted at whitehouse.gov was in fact the same document the Department of Health released to Barack Obama's attorneys. Ms. Nagamini declined, stating that the posse was asking for a verification and that such a request had to be made within the statutory laws of the state of Hawaii. The cold case posse was made aware of a logbook that existed within the delivery area at the Capulani Medical Center where Barack Obama was reportedly born. In this book, all births for a 2-year period were logged, and then the book was retired to the hospital's archives. Upon requesting access to the archived logbooks, the posse was told that the hospital was not in the business of investigating birth certificates, but in the business of saving lives. Soon after this comment, the posse was asked to leave the facility.
I want to point out again the correction. Both those incidents, Detective Brian Makowitz was there, a fully compensated sworn law enforcement officer who was credentialed and presented those credentials. I'm going to touch on Capulani first, and I'm going to go back to what happened in the Department of Health. At Capulani, we got information here developed out of Scottsdale from a retired physician who was a resident in 1970 in that very hospital. When you think of Capulani, we showed you a brief picture of it. That's what it looked like back in 1960. It looked like a resort. You wouldn't even picture it. It was a clinic. There was 60 beds. There were maybe, I believe they said 20 women at a time that may have been in there for labor. It's not a big facility at the time. We got information that there is a handwritten register, a log, that is kept at a desk back in those days at the delivery room door. And the tending nurse would record the name of the mother going in to have a delivery. That information remained in that book. That book remained in that desk drawer for 2 calendar years before it was finally placed in the library's archives. The library's archives are open to the public, and with permission from the hospital, anybody could go in there. That book becomes significant because if we could find 1961 and we could find Stanley Ann Dunham's name in that book, hey, he was born at the hospital. No such luck. They didn't offer to allow us into the hospital. They didn't tell us she was born there. He was born there. They didn't tell us that they had any medical records. As a matter of fact, they all but threw us out. They wanted nothing to do with this, and they were belligerent about it. Now, this would have been a piece of information that in our pursuit, we could have cleared up a lot of this, but they refused to cooperate. The Department of Health. The Department of Health was the first place that we stopped. I believe we did it on Monday, if my memory serves me correct. That wasn't our original intention. We understood that the media got wind that we were there and they were going to run stories. We had planned on going there on a Wednesday. So it took us out of our game a little bit. Detective Makowitz and myself went into the Department of Health, identified ourselves to a security guard for the sole purpose. We wanted to talk to the state registrar, Mr. Alvin Onaka, and ask him a simple question. Sir, did you validate this document? The document that has been presented by the White House. This question alone could have solved this. A yes or no. We were told immediately, Mr. Onaka doesn't speak to the public. Detective Makowitz advised them that we're not the public. We're the police. We're here conducting an investigation. Is there someone else we can talk to? About 5-6 minutes later, 3 individuals come out. We have to go through the whole credential thing again. They go scurrying off. Brian and I are standing there, and I look up and I see 2 of the biggest uniformed police officers I think I've ever seen in my life. I mean, these boys were big. One of them was a sergeant. They're coming in the back door. I look at Brian, he looks at me. We all know what this is. The sergeant walks up to one of the individuals that greeted us. He motions with his thumb, like they're over there. And I watch this police officer. He looks at us. He looks at the guy. We're in shirt and tie, carrying little folders. And he shakes his head as if, why did you call us? And they walk around the corner. We never see them again. About 3 or 4 minutes after that, the Deputy Attorney General comes walking out, identifies herself, and basically tells us again that Mr. Onaka couldn't talk to us. Detective Makowitz asked her if there was a place we could speak in private. They said we could find an office that we could use for about 15 minutes. We went into that office. During the course of the conversation going back and forth, it became very apparent to us that the Deputy Attorney General was doing nothing more than hiding behind state statutes at every question that we asked. At one point in the conversation, I held up a copy of that document, and I asked her point blank, could you at least tell me, is this a copy of the document that you provided Mr. Obama's attorneys? She accused me again of wanting a verification of a birth certificate and pointed me back to her statutes. I explained to her that I have a problem. The problem is, we know by the admission of the Department of Health that they released a photocopy, 2 photocopies, of the purported original long-form birth certificate placed in an envelope and given to Mr. Obama's attorneys. However, I don't know what's in the document. I don't know what's contained in that document. I don't know what's in the envelope. I don't know if it's this. And I proceeded to give her an example. I said to her, if I had to present my driver's license to the public for whatever reason, and I handed my driver's license to you and you scan it into a computer, but then you decide to change some information around, maybe move some information around, and then you display it, is that my driver's license? Her response to me was, but you still have a driver's license. You know, we're trained to understand what people are saying. The answer to that should have been no. But what she's telling me is, that's probably not what we released, but he still has a birth certificate. That's what she's saying to me. Based on that exchange, we verified that they did not make a PDF file at the Department of Health in Hawaii. If the Department of Health in Hawaii did not release this PDF computer-generated file, and this is not merely a photograph of a document, someone else created it. That is a forgery. There is no legal authority for anybody, including the President of the United States or his staff, to make an Hawaiian birth certificate, computerized, handwritten, in crayon, doesn't matter what it is. The only people that have the authority to do this is the Department of Health in Hawaii. Any way you twist and turn with this document, it is plagued with problems. This document doesn't even meet the test of the Department of Health's own prima facie evidence requirement, which is the lowest form of evidence that you could get. It is in conflict with itself on its face. It's time for this charade to stop. This is a real long time to be looking into something. A lot of money has been spent never to release this, and now that it's released, there's no evidence that it's authentic. There is not a document examiner in the nation that could go into a courtroom and declare this document authentic. It cannot be done. That means a judge could never rely on the authenticity of this document. If a judge can't rely on it, how come the people of Maricopa County are being asked to rely on it? And I know what you're thinking. Secretary Bennett. I know all about Secretary Bennett and his verification. A vital piece of information is missing from that. The date of the occurrence. I have it on good authority from several Department of Health in different states that none of them would have accepted that as a verification. But that's up to him. If he wants to accept it, that's going to be on him. The verification language also states that it's verifying information contained in a file. We've come to understand that information contained in a file could be supplemental information. Information that's brought forward to amend a birth certificate at a later date by means of an affidavit or some other form of information. Here's the problem. If that's what occurred with this document, and it is an amended birth certificate, per Hawaii law, they would have to mark this document altered on its face for everyone to see, and Hawaii law says it loses all of its own legal authority at that point. It can never be relied on. It actually becomes worthless. When you're creating a document like we believe has been created, there's a couple reasons to do it. Number one, it never existed and you have to make it. Number two, you're making it to conceal information. Or number three, you're making it to add information to give it the appearance of validity. It's going to be one of the three. The only people that know the answer to that is the Department of Health in Hawaii. That document, as far as we're concerned, proves nothing. I'm going to show you now the out-of-state numbers for the batching. And this is the number that's up here. This number is out of sequence. This has plagued people for a long time to get to the answer of this number. Like I told you before, Verna Lee told us that these are all numbered consecutive at the end of the month. That was the practice then, and that was the practice for a lot of years. So let me explain that through the video, and we'll elaborate on that a little longer.
Much has been made of the fact that Barack Obama has a higher birth certificate number than the Nordyke twins, who were supposedly born after him in the same hospital. In order to determine if this is actually a problem for Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate, we reviewed the Hawaii Department of Health's procedure for processing birth certificates and verified that these procedures were followed by speaking to Verna K.L. Lee, the clerk whose signature appears on Barack Obama's long-form birth certificate. Here's what we now know. The coding information from even-numbered certificates was forwarded to the federal government for vital statistics tracking purposes. If the certificates from the entire state of Hawaii had been lumped together and then sorted chronologically, there would have existed a statistical chance that outlying areas would have not been represented properly. If, for example, a small number of certificates from an outlying area all landed on odd-numbered certificates, the area would have been underrepresented. If they had all landed on even-numbered certificates, the area would have been overrepresented. In order to ensure proper representation, birth certificates were numbered in the central office at the end of the month after being sorted first geographically and then chronologically. Please note that birth certificates were never sorted alphabetically. If Barack Obama had been born at the Kapiolani Medical Center, he would have been processed in the same batch as the Nordyke twins, Gretchen and Susan. Given the fact that Obama was born before the Nordyke twins, he would have been assigned a lower number than the twins. This proves that Barack Obama could not have been born at the Kapiolani Medical Center as reported. The numbering on his certificate is more consistent with a birth certificate that had been turned in from one of the outlying areas. One final point regarding the newspaper birth announcements in the two local Hawaiian papers. These are very inaccurate sources of information. Single-parent births were not listed. Some announcements appeared in one paper and not the other, and sometimes when a paper was low on available print space, a few of the announcements were not listed at all. Therefore, these newspaper announcements cannot be relied upon to make any type of sense of the birth certificate numbering process.
Just think of it like this. The birth certificates are placed in different piles. You have everybody that was born in April 1961, August 1961, whatever the date is. You have that whole pile sitting there. You're going to go in with a numerical stamper. I think it was a Bates stamper, it may have been called. You're going to go in, and with every stamp, it clicks up one digit. 0001, next stamp, 0002. But these are stamped consecutively by different batches representing different geographical locations. The Nordyke birth certificates, consecutively numbered, odd and even I believe, consecutively numbered, came from the same location. Conceivably, Mr. Obama's should have come from the same location and be consecutively numbered in that batch. It is not. That's an indication to us that this was a reported birth from an outlying office. That means someone, possibly a relative, went in and declared the birth as if it happened in the state of Hawaii, although there is no evidence of that. Kapiolani has no records. We don't know of any medical records, any vaccine records. We don't know of anything. We don't even have a baby picture that says, I had my first Christmas, Halloween. Nothing. We don't have anything like that. As a matter of fact, we're getting information now that a lot of the photographs that we've been seeing have been digitally altered. We've also been getting information that there's a high probability that the information we're being fed about who the parents are may not be. We don't have any solid information as to where this event took place other than he's here. We don't know where it happened. This document certainly doesn't prove it. This document, like I said before, is in conflict with itself. No one seemed to be able to get into the records in the state of Hawaii's Department of Health to clear up the matter. The sheriff's been calling for the birth certificate, and this has been going on for 4 years, 5 years. Eventually, something's got to give. Do we have that last clip?
What's important if you are running for president is that the American people know who you are, what you've done, and that you're an open book. And
I'm going to leave you with that 11-second clip, and I'm going to ask the sheriff to come back here with some closing remarks. That was the president in his own words.
Thank you. Hope everybody could understand what you're saying. You know, I agree with the president. Should be an open book. Should live by the words that he said himself. We believe that the certificate presented to the American public by the White House is a forgery. He said that several months ago. What I said on March 1, and I will repeat it again, show us the microfilm. I said it a while back. Show us the microfilm and we'll all go back home and forget this. Where is the microfilm? Where is the microfilm? Is it in Hawaii? Department of Health? What's the big secret?
What's the microphone going to show?
We're now going to take some questions. I want you to identify where you're from and what organization. And Mike, you can answer some of these requests.
Sheriff Morgan Love from CBS 5 here. How do you expect any of us to believe any of this? You have two investigators who are in business together, and their business is peddling conspiracy theories.
Well, first of all, I think that's an insult, a big insult, because that's all you want to talk about. You don't want to look at the evidence. Look at the evidence and forget who's in bed with who. Look at the evidence. Talk about the evidence.
Your investigator, one of them, has never met a conspiracy theory. He hasn't put his arm to it. The other one...
You answer.
Go ahead. Finish with the other one.
And
He's going to
the other
answer.
one is making money off of this.
Oh, shit.
Okay.
Will you answer
How
that?
much money have you made off of this?
Made? Absolutely zero. Let me tell you about this so-called book. The mainstream media will not put this information out. That book that you're referring to is nothing more than that last press conference in writing for those that want to understand more about it. Let me finish. Let me finish. I didn't make anything lead on that book when I left for Hawaii. Coming back from Hawaii for a month in a pile of envelopes was a check for $700 And subsequently, another one came 2 weeks later for $630. I didn't even know it was there. The publisher called me and goes, "Hey, did you cash the checks?" I wasn't expecting a check. Got about $1,500 total that went directly to my church. I had made nothing off of that book. I didn't do this to make any money off of a book. And as far as a conspiracy theorist, I had no idea this stuff was going on when the sheriff called me. This is not something that captured my attention, but when you start something like this and the evidence starts to take you in a direction, all of a sudden, what sounds like a conspiracy may not be a conspiracy at all. There's evidence to substantiate this. You're looking at almost a year of my life into this, and we have more evidence to say it is not what it purports itself to be than what it is.
Mr. Zillow, can you
Sir.
clear up some questions about your background in law enforcement?
What do you want to know?
How many years did you work for the Democrats?
5.
And how long of that portion of time were you at the
Almost the entire time. They took me out of uniform extremely young. I also started as a reserve officer there prior to that. So I had street time there. On top of that, let me finish for you. 6.5, 7 years as a licensed investigator in the state of New Jersey, owning my own corporation before I moved out here in 1993.
The state of New Jersey says you were only a licensed investigator for 2 years, right?
The one that I own. Worked for other people. You got to check the facts.
Can we, hold on, can we get back to the investigation? And by the way, you want to question my credentials? 50 years in law enforcement, you want to, my credentials?
Assuming that if this were a real investigation, you'd be saving this for a judge and jury or a prosecutor.
Well, I hope that comes one day. I hope that I hope that Congress, I mean, they're busy investigating hookers in the Secret Service or the GSA and spending money. It's about time that Congress looked into it, and they're looking at the Fast and Furious. It's about time that Congress looked at this situation, and not ask, what credibility do you have, Sheriff? So, you're trying to go after the messenger. This is an official investigation, official, zeroing in on possible fraud of government documents. That's all, and it continues to be that.
Sheriff, your department has nearly 500 cases of child sex crimes that they did not investigate. What do you say to those kids that see you putting all this in?
So let's not talk about other issues, which we will resolve, because you don't seem to get your story straight when you do your hit pieces. Channel 5, But let's not get into that. Let us go into this investigation.
Sheriff, I have a question about this investigation.
What do you have? Next question.
I'm Tom Valentine. I'm a citizen journalist. On behalf of the subject of Morgan Lowe's most recent conspiracy theory, wherein he suggests that I work for Joe Arpaio, which I do not. I've never met him, and I do know him through email. I have a substantive question, though, unlike my friend Morgan, who peddles conspiracy theories himself for a living, I suspect. I don't suppose he does it for free. And my question is this. Whether it's the microfilm, whether it's Joe Nagamini, whether it's Alvin Onaka or Capulani Hospital, in every one of those questions or in every one of those cases when Mike requested information, could not they have cleared the president by simply providing the very simple information that he requested? That's my question.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. It's every document surrounding this one individual is plagued with problems. They're all plagued with problems. There's one excuse after another where you can't see it for whatever reason. I mean, it's everything. Right down to a college transcript. It's got a problem. We didn't invent this. This is just what's out there.
Let me just say one more thing. Thank God that this is being streaming, because the whole country really doesn't care about local politics, whether they like the sheriff or not. These are facts that we are talking about. It's an official investigation. Mike Zullo has done a great job on this investigation. Our deputy that we sent to Hawaii did a great job. I presume with all the resources that the federal government has, all their resources. They probably would have to send 100 agents to Hawaii if they could come up with the information that Mike came up with in one deputy. Look at the facts, what we came up with. I'm not taking a second seat because of Mike Zullo into his background or everything else. He has done a great job. We have worked hard at this. We wanted to clear the President of the United States. That was my mission, but it hasn't happened that way. And we have people of interest that we're not going, you forgot to say that, on this investigation. So I want someone, the U.S. Congress, someone to look at this and do something about it, and we will be very happy to cooperate. But my problem right now is who do you give it to? I want the U.S. Congress to look at this. They're looking at everything else. I think this is very important when you're talking about birth certificates, possible national security, immigration problems, which all of you seem to not even care about. And that should be looked into too.
Sheriff Kevin Kennedy with Channel 12 News. A lot of the stuff that you presented today raises some questions possibly. However, it seems that it lacks a lot of facts. One thing that I question about specifically is Verna Lee. When you guys talked with her, she seemed to be the one person that could possibly, the only person that I've heard of mentioned today, that really has a basis of fact in regards to this case. Did you record your conversations with her? Do you have anything from her side that says she believes what you guys are telling us today?
The answer to your question is yes. We did record the conversation. That telephone call, let me explain to you how this transpired. I had that birth certificate blown up on a big monitor, and I'm looking at it. And I'm looking at it, and I'm going, there's got to be something here. Everybody on that certificate, exception of Mr. Obama, is deceased, but UK Lee was a mystery. You couldn't seem to locate her. Didn't even really know who she was. Through a series of computer database searches that took a good part of the day, I was able to determine that there was a Verna Emily, I believe it was, in Hawaii, 95 years old. Subsequently, to finish some of the research, we had asked Mr. Corsi to go back to Hawaii, spend some time in the library. We needed more information now. We actually needed another 5 days in Hawaii. I know that you guys are going to cringe on that one, but we needed 5 more days in Hawaii. What we did learn in Hawaii is the locals don't like the police. They don't trust the police. They don't like to talk to the police. So what I did is I asked Mr. Corsi to contact Ms. Lee while I monitored the call and recorded it, and it was her. She, without hesitation, it was her. She is the only person that can factually tell us the procedures that went on there. Obviously, she doesn't have recollection of this certificate. This was nothing more than another birth certificate to her. We don't even know if that's her signature placed on it. We don't know if it came from another document. But she was in the office at that time, and she laid out the procedures that directly coincide with procedures written by a Mr. Bennett, who outlined that whole Department of Health protocol for birth certificates. It was almost identical. It was on the phone. And what I did is I asked Mr. Corsi to call as a reporter. Because you wouldn't get information calling as the police or an investigator. You just wouldn't get it. I've had so many doors shut on us over there that this one I wasn't going to risk. But this was her. That's going to be up to the sheriff. No, I don't. He is a reporter.
I have a question. Mr. Corsi has indicated in the past that he's offered up money to try to get information about hospital records in this particular Obama birth certificate case.
Where do you live?
North Lake is his problem. He indicated that he's tried to offer up money. Did any person, including Verna Lee, when she offered.
No.
Has anybody offered any money or given any money for their information?
No, and that's a great question. We don't do that. I'm not there to buy information. I mean, I don't know how to tell it to you any straighter than I'm telling it to you. If this document could be proved to me to be something other than what I'm stating here today, I would tell you.
It's very expensive.
And it's not. I can't find anything to, for lack of a better word, to clear this thing. And we go back to March 1st, I told you all, this isn't the result that I wanted. It's really not. I think this is a bad thing. But it is what it is. And let me just address something to your question on Mr. Corsi. Mr. Corsi, I personally interviewed for 16 hours. And I'll leave the expletives out. But I told him in no uncertain terms, through 14 hours of that, I wasn't buying this. It wasn't until the register stamp that we showed you on the March 1st, that's what got my attention. Mr. Corsi's information that he brought to us, and you have to understand, we did not seek Mr. Corsi out. He was offered up to us. He had information, documents, all kinds of things that for a good part of 3 months I had to sit and review and discarded as not germane to what we are investigating, or I didn't think was worth the paper it was written on. Now, that's not to say Mr. Corsi is incorrect in some of his assumptions, but the job of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office is to bring it to a higher level of proof. And that's what's happening here. There's nothing, this is not a politically motivated thing for me. It truly isn't.
Mike, just a follow-up real quick. Will you release that tape?
I'd ask the sheriff.
I
Sir.
asked her, don't ask her.
One question, sir.
We'll think about it, okay?
You mentioned that the locals
Where are you?
dislike or distrust the police. You didn't go over there in an official police capacity. Why would you expect them to do anything at all, especially private medical records?
No, ma'am, we identified ourselves when we went to those places. We didn't go in there playing I Spy. We went in there, told them who we were, why we were there.
You just said they distrust.
Well, we found that out. We didn't know that until we got there. But I'm not saying Kapolani Hospital distrust the police. They were schooled as to what to tell us. They didn't want any part of this. They told us to go away. I'm not saying that. We interviewed a lot of people. We have persons of interest we interviewed. We come up with other sources of information out there. And other people we talk to do not want to talk to the police.
Well, if you did not present yourself as the police, why would they not trust?
I did. We didn't go in as an undercover operation. We didn't go in trying to buy information. That's not what happened. That isn't the way it went. I understand now. I understand your question. We didn't try to conceal the fact of who we were, because we knew the newspapers over there. Actually, the newspapers released information that we were there. I think it was within 12 hours of us going to Department of Health. It was out of the bag. We were there. Now, go ahead.
But going back to the fact that you were not there in an official capacity, police or government capacity, why would you expect them to give you any sort of record, any personal record? Why would they?
We didn't go to. You talking about Kapolani?
Kapolani,
Well, I have an issue with the Department of Health. I mean, she is an attorney general. He is a sworn compensated deputy. He's on official business doing an investigation. Normally, those discussions between attorney generals and the police don't go like they did in Hawaii. There was something else going on there. So I don't understand that. As far as Kapolani is concerned, we asked access to their archives, which they do grant to the public. We weren't looking for, quote, medical records. And I will be 100% candid with you. If I could find that book, it could have put an end to all of this. I don't know what else to tell you. This isn't us chasing... This is the other thing. This isn't us chasing down the president. Everybody wants to make it that. This document is fictitious and it's been represented to the people of Maricopa County. Now, I'm sorry that the president claimed ownership of it. I'm sorry that it's the president. But if somebody represented something fictitious to you and you acted on it and found out it was wrong and you came to us, you'd want us to look at it. So I really am at a loss to understand why it's so difficult for people to understand that this is not politically motivated. Because it's not.
Are you incriminating the president in any way? Are you saying that the president has anything to do with this?
I am not. I am not, ma'am. I don't know what Mr. Obama knows about this. I truly don't.
I said in March 1, right from the beginning, we are not accusing the president of any crime. We are strictly investigating a possible government forged document, and that's the way we're still going with this. We're talking about documents.
But I don't get that. If this is a crime, and if the president works with this, how can he not be a crime?
We're not saying that he knew about it. Did we ever say he knew about it?
So you're telling me he doesn't know about this?
I have no idea. Unless you want to.
Yeah, let me see if I can. I think that's a great question. Let me explain this to you. Let me explain this to you, sir. I think I said in March 1st. Hang on. Hang on a minute. Sir. What I said in March 1st, none of us could validate with any certainty where we were born. We weren't cognizant of the event. Okay? For all I know, Mr. Obama has been told this his whole life. I don't know. It might even be he was born in Hawaii. What we are telling you is that document isn't real. That's the difference. That's the distinction in law. We're talking about a forged document being used, maybe mistakenly, by Mr. Obama. But somebody knows how it got there. The Department of Health didn't create it. They didn't create the file. Somebody else did. That mere fact means the Department of Health that would have the only legal authority to make a copy of a document like that or even render an abstract, the only legal authority to do it, did not. That's a falsified document.
So what do you want to happen? What exactly do you want?
That document's been represented over the internet to the people of Maricopa County. We're telling you the document is a forgery. We would like the persons that made it brought to justice. It's pretty simple. It could end there. Anything else is out of the purview, the venue of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. I don't know, but I know it's parked itself at the White House at some point.
Sheriff, are you ever going to let this further issue, are you going to figure out?
Well, right now we'd like to give it to somebody. I think we did quite a bit of work on this, and I would like the Congress to have hearings, maybe a special prosecutor, not only for this issue, but an issue how easy it is to get a birth certificate in Hawaii. When we're talking about national security, talking about immigration, so even just on that issue, they should look into this. Very simple. So I have to decide who to give it to, and in the meantime, we're not closing the file, but if we get any more information regarding this matter, of course, we'll continue to receive that information. But right now, it's time for someone else to look into this situation. Very simple.
Sheriff, given what you believe to be the case here, if the president...
This is the last question.
...proceedings to a motorcade, do you have your deputies pull him over?
The what?
Do you have your deputies pull him over to prove his citizenship?
Can we
I'm not even
allow
gonna
one
answer
last question from the
Hold on. You're with Channel 5, is that right? You didn't identify yourself. You are with Channel 5, local CBS Channel 5. I just want to make sure you're identified.
One last question for you. Go ahead, sir.
I actually have two questions. The number 9 on the first certificate, I'm not understanding the significance of that. Are you guys saying that was left blank and
Yes.
put something in there?
That in 1960, when it was coded, 1961, when it was coded by hand by one individual, then rechecked. Number 9 would indicate that field is left blank because it's unstated information. It can't have something in it. If it had African or whatever, it would have been coded differently. Number 9 says unstated. It has to be blank.
So what's the significance of the microfilm? I don't get it.
The microfilm would show if there is an original document. If it's an original document, it better look just like that. I would venture to say it doesn't.
Isn't that what the Secretary of State looked at?
No, he did not.
Isn't that what was verified?
He did not. No, you got to read the verification and see what they said. They are verifying information. Information could be information brought into a file at a later date. This document could actually be amended information. which could have happened in 2006, 7, 8, 9, on an affidavit. And there's no sourcing of that information. There's no investigation into the information to see if it's even creditable.
That's, folks, I'm sorry, that's it for the questions. We have a press release, if you'd like it. We also have the detailed report on the findings of the computer experts. Also, this press release can be found online at www.mcso.org. The press release also contains all the video demonstrations